Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. My name is Nimesh and Radia, and I'm your host. I always love starting this podcast by saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel so very blessed with this podcast. My intention was really to simplify spirituality and guide people on their spiritual journey, and I love the messages I receive on a weekly basis. I feel so blessed this podcast is reaching so many people. So I always love by saying thank you. Thank you to everyone that's supported this podcast. Thank you for everyone that's listening. I feel so very blessed. I'm blessed with what I get to do. I get to guide people to shine their light. I really do feel like we've been pushed to expand, to release anything we're holding on to truly become authentic. And I get to guide people who are ready to do that. So I feel very, very blessed. This podcast won't be where it is today without my beautiful co-host. So introducing the amazing, the stunning, the healer extraordinaire, Stacey Brown. Stacey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, friends. It's good to be back. I love that we're recording and producing more episodes for you. My name is Stacey. I'm an intuitive. I do readings for people from around the world. I'm also an Akashic record reader, a spiritual coach and mentor, and a recently published author. My book, Journey to Soul Center, Discovering the Gift of Surrender, is available on Amazon and Audible. I can't wait to see where this episode takes us today.
Yeah, looking forward to it too. I should have also mentioned I'm a spiritual mentor and coach, an Akashic trainer, Akashic reader, as well as a podcast creator. And like I was saying, I love what we get to do. And I'm excited about today's episode. So it's interesting because normally we pick podcast topics kind of months in advance, and we don't script anything. Whatever comes through comes through. But more recently, we've been picking podcast topics, kind of what we feel is going on energetically, and we're still saying we don't channel anything, whatever comes through. Sorry, we channel everything. We don't script anything, whatever comes through, comes through. In this week's topic, we kind of selected the same way, i.e., what we feel is going on energetically. I guess so many questions around soul contracts and, kind of the impact they're having. I talk a lot about on social media about how recently through the last few months, etc., that it really has been a lot of soul contracts closing, kind of coming to an end, and karmic connections and healing coming with this. So that's why I thought and felt this week's topic, why don't we talk about soul contracts and relationships and the karmic connections and healings that come with it, and kind of answer some questions and go deep on what that looks like. So if I just kind of, for me, soul contracts are contracts we make with other souls before we incarnate into our physical body. So if we want to, if the soul wants to experience any, let's say, unconditional love, some deep pain, for me, those soul contracts, those karmic connections, and when we say karmic connections, for me, they're deeper soul contracts. They're here to expand us karmically, i.e., help us release some karma, and really kind of have some deep learning. So for me, those relationships are decided and defined as souls before we incarnate into our physical body. So that's where soul contracts come from. We agree with another soul to co-create, to have an experience together. Because there's always two parts, right? What we're here to experience and what the other person's here to experience for themselves. So those contracts, let's say we need to experience pain. We then have a contract with another soul to experience that pain. And obviously, once we incarnate, if we remembered that we were meant to experience pain with this person, we'd avoid that person, right? Because why would we want to experience pain? That's where the veil of amnesia comes in. So when we're born, we have these soul contracts with other beings. They're here to help us experience something. But if we remembered, especially the deeper learnings, the more painful ones, we have this veil of amnesia. And the work that we do in this human existence allows that veil to become thinner and thinner. And also kind of what's happening on the planet also has an impact on the veil. For example, recently in between the two eclipses that we had a few weeks ago, the veil was thinner. And that's why our dreams are more vivid. That's why our experiences are more intense. So it's kind of multifaceted. And then the other part to it is also our blood family, the blood family we picked. And in many ways, our blood families are, I hate to expand this even further, maybe then because they understand us from a childhood and therefore can press our buttons in a much deeper way. But the same blood family is not always here to love us, right? Sometimes the family we pick, the soul family, the human soul family we pick, that's where we get the love from. So this is such a deep topic, and we'll kind of get into the deepness of it. And I could talk about it for hours, because there's that, the soul contracts. And when you start to understand, for me, we're all the center of our stories. And if we realize that we center the stories, and the roles around us, the people around us are all playing the roles that we ask them to play. So in many ways, if we realize, this was what I mean when I talk about us being the center of our world, when we put us at the center and we look up at the people playing the roles around us, we have to understand that we ask them to play those roles. So everything in our external is a result of something our internal. Soul contracts. And the more that we understand and ask, well, hold on, what's this person here to teach me? The easier life gets. And also to ask the question, and this is where this topic came from today, is to ask, is my soul contract with this person complete? And the more that you kind of change your question, the more you start to understand what's happening around you. So Stacey, when I say to you, soul contracts and the impact they have, and if you think about the deeper relationships and your experiences, what does it mean to you?
So I think the first thing that comes to mind is the relationship with my children, because those contracts are lifelong, right? Those are contracts that I entered into in a sacred way to bring 4 children into the world and to have that be the vessel, like leading them into this world. And I have a role to play in each one of my children's lives. And what does that look like? And sometimes it can look very different than what you expected it would. I've talked often about the challenges that I've faced with my one son, and he was such an easy child growing up that I just thought, well, this contract is going to be easy to fulfill. This is going to be a role that I will not be challenged by. And it wasn't until he was a teenager and he started battling mental health and substance abuse issues that I really saw the magnitude of what it was triggering in my life. And so when I think of soul contracts, the first contracts I think of are my children. And then the next ones I think of are the ones that were the relationships that brought the children into the world, right? Those relationships with the men in my life that that resulted in marriage and then divorce, and the lessons that I've learned from that and the growth that I've experienced from that. So those are some of the first things that come to mind when I think about soul contracts and having an agreement with someone in this life that I was to carry out a mission. So it feels to me like that's at the forefront. I know there are other soul contracts that I have. Absolutely. I think about the way we met, right? And we talk about the roller coaster that I've brought you on. But I think about that soul contract and the fact that we had no idea when we were getting into this, what we were getting into and what this would look like for us. And here we are doing a podcast and working together, and we've traveled back and forth to see each other. And I had no idea that that contract would exist with you.
Neither did I. Neither did I. And that's the beauty of it, right? And kind of, I believe that kids always pick the mom as a soul. That means that your kids, when you talk about the kids and the experience, they picked you. And again, I believe that the mom picks the dad. So it's there's no, if anyone listening to this thinking, well, hold on, why would I pick that dad for my kids, or why if you're thinking, why would why did my kids pick mom and all that sort of stuff? It's all about what you're here to experience. Sometimes we get caught up in what our expectations of are, right? So Stacey, I think about your son and how much the healer in you expanded because of the experience you went through with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is that realizing that, some of our deeper soul contracts, our karmic ones, are here to expand us in a deep sort of way. And really kind of taking us on that journey to realize and understand that we pick the people around us. And I get that's hard sometimes, right? If you've got, if you're in a relationship right now that's not serving you, you kind of wonder, well, hold on, why would I pick this relationship? That's where you've got to kind of ask and say, well, hold on, what am I here to learn? What is this relationship teaching me? And then being honest with yourself, how has it expanded you? What karma are you releasing from this life? And then asking, well, hold on, is my soul contract complete? Because sometimes we stay in situations because they're comfortable. What I mean is that this is what we're used to doing. Even if you're uncomfortable, if you're used to being in a certain situation, you stay in that because there's a part of you that's comfortable in there, and there's part of you that knows that you're going to have to push to do something different, to change.
Mm-hmm.
But this is why I use the phrase, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The suffering comes from us staying in a situation where the soul contract's complete. And there's so many different levels of contract, right? You I guess you start with your blood family. What are they here to teach you? What are they here to expand? And then, as you said, you think about, okay, if you're kids, what are they? Because from everything I've seen and learned, our kids are our biggest expanders. It's really interesting, right? We're meant to guide our kids, guide the children in lives. But actually, in so many ways, they expand us in ways that we couldn't even imagine. Then you consider the deeper relationships in your life and how much they've expanded you. And it's I would always recommend journaling about it and really kind of asking yourself and being honest, because everything you've been through, and if it's painful, is something that you agreed to as a soul contract. And I get that's sometimes really hard, because it's like, well, hold on, especially if you've been through a painful existence, why would I agree to this? Why would I, as a soul? I mean, I've had so many conversations with my soul where I'm like, wait, what did we commit to? Why would we do this? And it's just because the thing is that as a soul, especially many of the souls that are here now, we've agreed to release so much of our own personal karma, but also so much ancestral karma. And so that's why we're experiencing things at such a deep level at this time, because we've agreed to release so much karma. And so if you need to release so much karma, that also means that soul contracts that you have in your life have to go deeper, which is why we're experiencing the extremes that we are, experiencing joy, experiencing pain, experiencing heartbreak. This is the time, and this is what we signed up for. And I get that's hard, right? I mean, Stacey, some of the soul contracts and some of the things that you've been through, I'm sure there's been times where you like, wait, why did I sign up to this?
Yeah, I still feel that way right now. I mean, I'm several years out from my divorce, and I still wonder why I agreed to this contract with this person that has spanned over, 20 plus years and now is non-existent. He's moved on. He has a very serious relationship. He's getting married. We have no contact. His life is in a different state than mine. And I ask myself, what was the point of that? But I believe that we were connected to each other to bring our children into the world. And I believe that we reconnected as our children were older so that we could navigate through the challenging season with my son together. And now that contract is done and there's still grief happening. And I don't know if anybody else can relate to this. Even if you know a relationship is unhealthy, there can be grief when that contract is done, feeling that, you thought this person was going to be in your life for the long haul and now they're not. And what do you do with that? And I'm still coming to terms with that, Nims. I mean, even now, I still feel the waves of grief. I still feel the waves of sadness. And I'm working on the acceptance that that contract is done and that we're in a new season. And it's not an easy place to be.
And that's see, it's I understand sometimes when the words I use, I make it sound easy, and it really isn't. I'd say, look, sometimes spirituality is simpler than we really understand, but it doesn't make it easy. And a lot of it comes down to our expectations, right? It's like, knowing that your soul contract in that instance is potentially complete doesn't necessarily mean that that you're not going to feel the pain that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in that situation, you need to ask, what is my lesson? Have I integrated my lesson? And see what you get from that question, right? Because the other thing that happens is repeat programs, right? It's like sometimes we go through a deep karmic lesson with somebody, and then we attract a similar relationship, and then we wonder, well, why would we do that? It's just that it's another. For me, I don't believe in repeat programs. What I believe is that we're experiencing something at a different level. It's a different level of healing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you, for example, I mean, sometimes they say that men attract people like their moms, and women attract people like their dads. It's kind of true, right? Because you also attract what you used to, and you also attract what you need to release. But then you also got to, for me, as the veil gets thinner, you've got to really understand who you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're still experiencing the pain of a previous relationship, that means you're still healing from it. You're still learning. You're still integrating the lesson. And sometimes that is a lifelong journey, right? That integration happens over a period of time. I mean, it's like the relationship you mentioned was somebody that was in your life for many years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we can click our fingers and all of a sudden, it's you just released and moved on and you're happy. And it's like grief, right? Losing a loved one. It's very
Mm-hmm.
similar. It comes in waves. It comes in different phases. And my only advice in that situation would be to have an honest conversation with yourself. How do you really feel? What are you really holding on to?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times we're holding on to the expectations. The expectation you talk about in your book, right? Is you thought when you kind of got back to, you thought it was going to be for life, right? So your expectations, you bought your dream home. So your expectations were that you were going to be in that home with him for forever, right? It's that what it comes down to is your expectations of what you thought your life was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
And when we met, again, how deep we get in this podcast, but when we met, the experience you had of coming here and stuff, there was a journey where it's like when you're in a dark space, sometimes you don't even realize you're in a dark space.
Mm-hmm.
And changing your orbit and going somewhere different helps you to see that light, helps you to understand the darkness that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how that felt, and in terms of the journey you kind of went through to truly understand the darkness you were in and the light that you found?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I wasn't in a good space. I knew that my marriage wasn't in a good space. Like surface, I knew that. But it wasn't until I, stepped out of my comfort zone and took the trip to come see you that I separated myself from my environment and really started evaluating what was happening there and how toxic the relationship had become. And through that space, um, I recognized that my needs weren't being met and that I wasn't in a space that was healthy for me. And I knew that something needed to change. And it was very, very jarring for me to fly home from the UK, land in the US, and recognize immediately that my husband was having the exact same feelings, that the relationship wasn't healthy, that he wasn't happy, and that we needed to do something different. And it was like, even though I took the time to be away from the situation and to process it, it was still very shocking to go home and recognize that he was having the same epiphanies that I was, that the relationship wasn't healthy and that we weren't good together. And I felt like I came home understanding and being clear that something needed to change, but I wasn't expecting for him to feel the same thing. And so when I got home and he was saying he felt the same way, things just started moving really quickly. And I thought that I was going to be going home and kind of working through some challenges and facing them. And what ended up happening was a very abrupt conversation of him saying that he also was done. And the feeling of like the Band-Aid being ripped off, that we weren't going to stay in the same cycle that we were in. And here I am a couple years later, and I still have moments of being jarred by that conversation. Like there's still some acceptance happening. There's still some grief happening. There's still some clarity that I'm trying to get. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to talk about, is just because a soul contract shifts or comes to a close doesn't mean that you're going to be ready to process that quickly or to get over it. It can take time to work through all the layers of a contract coming to an end.
Very true, very true. And this is the other thing that we got to also bear in mind, is that there can be many layers to a soul contract, right? And again, using your example, there was a time where you and your partner did love each other, right? There was that unconditional love. So that's what that part of the soul contract. That's what you were here to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the pain, the shift, whatever happened, and part of it was also what your son went through, and kind of the extreme nature of that, and how the healing from that, you both healed differently. And sometimes traumatic events like that can have such an impact and cause soul contracts to shift,
Mm-hmm.
especially those traumatic events. And then once you decide to separate, that healing, especially when it's a deep karmic relationship, can go in layers and phases like grief. It can go on for years, and in some cases the rest of your life, right? And it's like grief. It's not like it's a switch you can switch on and off. It's an integration of whatever karma you're releasing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just and then all of a sudden relationships happen that you weren't expecting, right? But this is another version of a soul contract, like me and you meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We met on social audio, right? We met randomly in an app called Clubhouse. That I just heard you speak and how vulnerable you are, and that's where our connection started. And from there, we've healed so much together. We've guided each other in such a way that and it's the mentorship program, that we the work that we do together, as well as this podcast. It's but that we knew that when we met, that spiritually we were really well aligned, and that was it was just a knowing there. It's just a weird knowing, just like and this is where maybe for our listeners is look at those relationships that happen just by chance, because I also believe that when we're ready to heal, the people that we've contracted to help guide us through that will show up.
Mm-hmm.
When the student's ready, the teacher will show.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sidra, it's like for me, and if you listen to the podcast before, Sidra was my mentor, my friend on this human realm. She's now one of my spiritual guides. and she passed away in March 2020. And my expectation of that soul contract was we were going to do spiritual work together on this plane for all. She's younger than me, so I was like, okay, we're going to do this for all our lives. And then when she left this realm, I was in doubt. I was like, well, hold on a second. There's my expectation, this soul contract. And this is where I found Akashic Records and understood, and that she's now one of my guides. And just the universe is really interesting in terms of it's our expectations that keep us stuck. I could have quite easily, when Sidra left, got lost in the humanness of my expectations. Oh my God, I thought we were going to do, and of course I did for a bit, right? And I still miss her humanly. Yes, of course. But I accept that she is exactly where she's meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we struggle. Acceptance, from a healing journey, awareness is always the first step. And how do you become aware? You become aware by asking the questions. Like I was talking about, which soul, what are these soul contracts taught me? What karma am I releasing? Are these soul contracts complete? Those type of questions help you become aware of the soul contracts around you. And the next stage is always acceptance. Because let's say some of these soul contracts you expected to be in your life forever, but then when you ask the question, you realize that you're now in a toxic situation that's not serving you. And then accepting that actually you stayed in this situation, it's no longer serving you, is part of it. Mm-hmm. Unless you've got a time machine, which I know I haven't. So, you have to accept this current version of you. And from there, it's always love and then deciding and taking action. And that's the journey that we're on, right? Acceptance is awareness on its own. It can be super painful, because then you realize, once you become aware and you start asking these questions, it opens up the doorway to you realizing that your environment you're responsible for your environment. And if you don't do something about it, again, that can be very frustrating. Mm-hmm. That's the interest of this human journey, right? And these soul contracts, and this is, as I said at the beginning, is really looking at your life and knowing that you're at the center, and everybody else around you is playing the roles that you asked them to play. Mm-hmm. So, which means if you're in a painful situation, at some level, your soul asked for the people in your life to play these roles for you to have this experience. And the quicker you integrate the lessons that come from these soul contracts, if they're causing you pain, the quicker that, in theory, the soul contract can be complete, and you can move on to whatever's next. And this is the other thing, is that when a soul contract is complete, it doesn't always mean that soul leaves your life, right? There could be just another version, another soul contract. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you got kids, right? There's still some sort of co-parenting contract, right? Who knows, right? So this is where it becomes interesting in terms of really understanding what your soul's here to experience, and accepting that, especially in this lifetime, we've all contracted to experience some extreme experiences, pain and joy, mm-hmm. love and kind of the deep heartbreak that goes with it. And acceptance is always the biggest part of it. And acceptance isn't always like, okay, I fully accept. It comes in waves. It's like grief. Mm-hmm. Like it's what you talked about now. It's just the loss of a relationship is actually grieving. It's death. It's death of the old self. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, it comes multifaceted. It comes from the loss of that person, but actually it's also more a loss of what our expectations of what we thought that person was going to be. Mm-hmm. How does that feel? How does that sound?
I think you're spot on. I think we get an idea in our head of how a relationship is supposed to go, or what we think is supposed to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, there can be some serious waves of grief that happen in response to that, where we, like my marriage, I remarried my husband thinking that we were going to be together forever. And it ended up being very different than what I could have imagined. And now I'm working on navigating a completely different life than what I would have anticipated happening. And there's waves of grief that happen with that. There's also the excitement and anticipation of what's next and what does that look like. But I think a lot of times when someone comes into our lives, we assume that they're going to play a certain role. And then when that doesn't happen, we are jarred by it. And yet I, ask what in your life has turned out the way that you expected it would. I mean, how often do we have an assumption of how things are going to go and they don't go that way? And I think that soul contracts are a perfect example of that, where people come into our lives and sometimes it's for a season, sometimes it's for a specific reason, sometimes it's for a lifetime, but we can try to shove somebody into a box of where we think they're going to be in our lives, and then it turns out totally different.
And that's the interesting thing, right? Sometimes we kid ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes we keep ourselves in situations hoping that person's going to change, that person's going to do different and fulfill our expectations. And this is why I ask people to look in the mirror and have an honest conversation with yourself about soul contracts, because that will bring you into some level of awareness and really maybe challenge yourself and ask, well, hold on, am I being authentic to myself? Do I have expectations? Because who are we to change the other person?
Mm-hmm.
Who are we to try and mold somebody to meet our expectations? And that's the other question we need to ask is, are we molding ourselves to be what we think the other person wants? Or are we being our authentic selves? Because again, if we're molding ourselves to be something we're not, then is that what you're really here to experience?
Mm-hmm.
And that's this life, this period of life that we're in is really expansive. And this is why we're feeling as much as we are. The planet is going through a massive shift. If you've heard this podcast before, you've heard us talk about it, right? We're shifting from a divine masculine to divine feminine, which is probably the biggest shift we have ever felt in our lifetime. So the planet is going through this big shift. And also what that's doing is forcing us to look in the mirror, look at our lives. So many soul contracts are coming to an end. This is a time where, all these things we've been holding on to, it's almost like the universe is pushing us to not hold on to things anymore,
Mm-hmm.
to truly let go of the layers that are not serving us so we can truly shine our authentic light. And it's not meant to be easy, right? Because some of these things, some of these expectations we hold on to. That's what this is also what rebirth looks like. What a rebirth is that we have all these soul contracts and we think, okay, everything's great, everything's the same way. And we go through rebirth, everything changes. We go through such a massive shift. Like a traumatic event, like you were talking about with your son. It could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that traumatic event causes you to go through some kind of rebirth. And that rebirth means that actually all your expectations and the people around you are no longer serving you. And so many of us have gone through that rebirth, which is forcing us to look in the mirror and really ask, hold on a second. The things that used to excite you, the people that used to excite you, the souls that used to excite you, maybe they don't excite you anymore. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. And the other thing is, it's like, sometimes when we know a soul contract's complete, we stay in that soul contract because we don't want to cause pain.
Mm-hmm.
And who are we to try and stop somebody's pain? If as listeners, if you go back through the periods where you had your most pain, that's probably when your biggest growth came through.
Mm-hmm.
So when you stay in a situation because you don't want to cause pain, what if you're stopping somebody's growth? What if their expansion, their growth comes from experiencing that pain? And it doesn't mean you need to always cause pain when a soul contract complete, but you're not here to stop somebody's pain.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you've got to check in with yourself and say, well, hold on a second. If this soul contract's complete, how can I do with ease and grace?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you're stopping. Because, I mean, Stace, when you talk about your grieving process, you become this amazing healer through that grieving process, right? And it's interesting. It's kind of easier for someone to see from the outside than maybe as it is in the inside, which is why I can see your example, right? I can see the beauty of the healer that you become through your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I would wish, and if somebody wants to kind of see what the ending of a soul contract looks like, and kind of what this roller coaster of a journey and how it helps you grow into the healer, then I would highly recommend reading Stacey's book. She talks a lot about what she's experienced and what she's had to release, but also the amazing beauty of the healer that she's become. So, yeah, Stacey, I'll let you talk a little bit about your book, but also I'd love for you to talk about, the soul contracts that have ended in your life. How have they expanded you? You talked about the pain,
Mm-hmm.
but the other flip side is they've activated things in you that I'd love for you to talk about.
Yeah, it's powerful to think about it because I would not be doing the work that I'm doing right now if I had stayed married. If I had stayed in that contract, I would still be behind the chair doing hair full time and hiding my gifts and abilities and shrouding them in secrecy. I would not be helping the clients that I'm helping right now. I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing right now. And that's powerful to think about because I recognize that the work that we do has a huge impact on people and it's life-changing work. It's not surface work, right? It's not a surface haircut session where somebody gets a new look. Like it is deep soul work. And I'm very, very clear that I would not be doing the work that I've been doing for the last several years if I had stayed in that contract. And so that's the beautiful part of a soul contract coming to an end is when you recognize that you're able to live more authentically and more true to who you are because that contract ended. That contract for me had a lot of restrictions in the way that we interacted with each other, in the way that we handled, our lives together, etc. And life looks very different now than what it did. And I've been able to help a lot of people because that contract ended. And I think about the ripple effect that it's had in a positive way that it ended because I have been able to help the people that I've helped. And I wouldn't be doing that if I had stayed in that situation. So where would all of those people be in their life right now? So there's things like that that I can reflect on beyond the grief that make me realize this had to happen because I'm now being more true to who I am than ever before, right? I'm out there serving in a way that I wouldn't otherwise. And so through the pain has come a deeper sense of purpose. And through that purpose has come the intention that I want to put out there who I really am and share that with people on the most authentic level that I possibly can. And when I was in that contract with my husband, I was doing a lot of hiding.
Isn't that interesting? And do you want to talk a little about your book and kind of the journey of that and kind of the healing that process and kind of almost signified the ending of a soul contract, right?
Yeah, because I felt like I got to the UK with you and spent a couple weeks thinking that I was there to study Sidra's work. And then this feeling came over me that I was meant to write my book. And I mean, that was a shock to both of us that we were going to be doing that. But
For sure.
it was a process that I felt deeply guided to. And we were meant to do it together. That's another part of our contract was absolutely writing that book and releasing it and going through the process of unpacking some of the relationships that I've had in my life and what those relationships, how they've impacted me and what they've looked like, and bringing me to a space of greater clarity of who I am through the writing of that book. And I think that book was a huge part of awakening and closure at the same time for me.
Powerful, powerful. I can include the link to the book in the show notes. And I think about, the kind of the endings in my life, especially the humanly, you call it death. I mean, the soul continues, but, mom, dad, leaving me in this realm somehow has also led to massive expansions, but also Sidra, right? Sidra came into my life at a time when I was spiritually awakening to a deeper level. She's the one that guided me to the healer I am. But in many ways, I was playing safe. I was hiding behind her. I was joining her at her events. I didn't realize I was playing safe.
Mm-hmm.
When she left this before, while she was here humanly, she always called me her trump card. I never understood what that meant. It's like, what do you mean? And somehow I was always in the background. And when she left this realm, I understood that I was playing safe. I was in the shadows. I was being her trump card, and now she's no longer in this realm. She can help so many more of the people on the other side. And me being the trump card meant actually now I can start shining my light. The podcast started from that whole thing, right? So anyone listen to this podcast, anyone that's been touched by this podcast, it came from that soul contract I had with Sidra that ended that phase of it when she left this realm. But a new phase of her becoming and being one of my spiritual guides began.
Mm-hmm.
So she's still my guide, but it's our expectation. Do I miss her humanly? Of course I do. I mean, we're all having this. Do I wish, mom, dad both passed away young? Do I wish they'd stayed longer? Yes, of course I do. But the work I've done, do I understand the journey of those soul contracts? Yes, I do. And by the way, the work that we do, the mentorship program that we have, is really there to help you to understand your soul contracts, help you to remove the layers of your expectations to truly become authentic. We do that through such a beautiful journey. Should always come with a health warning, but if you're ready to really become your authentic self, then book a free discovery call. We help you to understand what's happening around you. We help you to understand your soul contracts. I guess the part that we've got to also talk about is how do you end when you know a soul contract's complete? Because I always talk about, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. For me, staying in a soul contract when it's done is the suffering part. And sometimes you do it, let's say, you've got kids, you stay in a situation because you do it for the kids. But again, then I challenge that a little bit in terms of what example are you setting for the kids?
Mm-hmm.
Are you creating a loving environment for them, or are you creating an environment where when they grow up, they will stay in unloving situations? Again, it's just having that honest conversation with yourself. But again, when you've decided a soul contract's complete, the first thing that sometimes we do is we want to you made a decision, you want to take action on it. You can always call in the archangels. You can call in Archangel Michael, who's great at kind of guiding you through cutting a soul contract. You can call on people like us humanly, open your Akashic records. The first thing is always to accept that soul contract's complete.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest part, is to accept that soul contract's complete. And then by all means ask for help for this phase to be done with ease and grace. That doesn't mean that you're not going to experience pain, because it's a loss. It doesn't mean there's not going to be collateral damage of some sort. Some things you need to work out, especially if the person has such a big, and maybe you live together, whatever that looks like. But the first thing is always accepting the soul contract's complete.
Mm-hmm.
And then trusting whatever's coming next. And that's scary, right?
Very.
Once you know a soul contract's complete, embracing and trusting and taking that trustful is painful. I mean, you had the experience of coming back from a trip to the UK thinking that you had a bit of time, knowing that your marriage is over, but thinking you had a bit of a time. But within 24 hours, you were effectively homeless, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so can you just take us through the end of that soul contract and kind of the journey and what it feels like?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that I had time. I thought that I was working on my own timeline and that I was going to be able to kind of peacefully and strategically take my time figuring out the next steps and having the closure happen when I was ready. And when I came home, it was very abrupt, and it was like, okay, I'm going to stay in this and try to buy time. And then it was like, no, that's not what's happening here. This is done. And it was a very abrupt cutoff, very abrupt and shocking to the system. Even though I knew the contract was done, it was something extremely jarring for me. And even now, when I think about it, it makes my stomach turn because it was just so shocking to my system to come home from a trip where I had gotten so much clarity on who I was. I had written my book. I had, channeled a mentorship program with you. Like, all these amazing things were happening. And then I came home to this abrupt halt that my life was not going to look anything like I thought it was going to. And it was absolutely one of the most shocking things I've been through, even though I knew that I wasn't happy and things weren't good. I didn't anticipate it going down the way that it did in such an abrupt way.
And that's the key, is right. And it's our expectation, and somehow you have to trust, and it's not easy, right? I mean, well, I say this quite. You're one of the strongest people I know because you again made the decision. I remember when you got back within kind of a few hours. I remember I was in an all-day meeting, and every time I spoke to you, things had changed, and you come to the end of it where you made the decision you could no longer stay in that home. And I look at your life now. You've got your own place, you've got your own way of being, you found a loving partner, and you're creating in this healer that you become. And so for me, you're an example of somebody who was brave enough to end a soul contract, kind of, and you call it in your book the end of a fairy tale, kind of ending your fairy tale as you thought it was going to be to create a
Mm-hmm.
new one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great example of when you take that leap of faith, the universe does hold your space, and there's going to be times when it doesn't feel like it. Going to be times when it feels like, why did I do what I did? But I would encourage anyone that's going through something to stay the course.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like I said earlier, I really do feel that right now there's so many soul contracts ending, there's so many rebirths happening. If you can be present in the moment, have an honest conversation with yourself, I truly believe you'll get your insights. Doesn't mean you don't have to go through things, but it does mean you get your insights.
Mm-hmm.
So Stacey, as we're coming to the end of the episode, what would your advice be to anyone that's kind of coming to a conclusion that major soul contracts are coming to an end? What advice would you give them?
Give yourself the space to grieve. Give yourself the space to process what's happening. I think a lot of times we can get on automatic pilot and we just abruptly move from circumstance to circumstance or situation to situation. And we don't give ourselves the proper time to process what's happening. And this is where I feel journaling is such a powerful tool, because when you have no space to process what you're going through, you can sit down with yourself and do it through writing and really allow yourself the space to unpack what's happening. Whether it's a relationship with a partner that's coming to a close, whether it's a work relationship that's coming to a close, a friendship, whatever it is, give yourself the space to process it, to step back and understand what's happening, maybe to understand why it's happening. And if you're not in that space, give yourself the space to meditate on it and try to receive that closure as it comes to you, because it doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes it takes, unpacking in segments or layers for you to understand exactly why this relationship is coming to an end. And sometimes it takes a period of time for that clarity to come. but give yourself the space to process it. And I really believe that so many of us downplay the significance of writing and being introspective with ourselves. But I think that's one of the most powerful things we can do when a contract's coming to an end, is to give ourselves the space to unpack the layers of it, to understand maybe what was happening that wasn't working for us or wasn't serving us. And then also in that, to think about the relationships that we do need, and what feels good to us and what lights us up. Those things can help us to figure out who needs to be in our life and who we need to focus and put more emphasis on.
Great advice. Great advice. And I guess I can relate so much in terms of, this journey that we picked is intense. And the more that you can, again, like I said earlier, let go of your expectations and ride the wave, be kind to yourself. Having a strong self-care routine, like we always talk about, I feel is also important, because that helps you to be present. It helps you to really put you first. And it's just really interesting when we're going through something, a lot of the time, that's when we don't put ourselves first. That's when we stop doing the things that truly lift us up. And it is harder, right, when you're going through something. But I would encourage you to have that strong self-care routine. Think about the community you have around yourself. Because again, when you're going through this, sometimes your group does become smaller, right? But think about who in that small group can hold your space.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to fully understand you because what you're going through is unique to you. But who in your group, who can you truly lean on through these times? Stacey, I was blessed to, that we found each other, and, kind of, I felt like I was there for you as much as I could, guiding you through that. And, you've guided me through a lot. Just like, I feel so blessed in so many ways that the right people come at the right time. But you have to be open to that, right? You have to create space and vacuums in your life for new people to come in who can guide you. So Stacey, as I close this episode out, I'm going to ask you for some journal prompts. What's in your heart to share, to allow anyone that's listening to kind of go deep on what's happening around them?
So I think one of the first things to do is evaluate the relationships that you have around you and ask yourself, are these relationships serving me? Right? Because if a relationship is coming to an end or a soul contract is coming to an end, we're not really going to know unless we take a closer look at the relationships around us and what benefits we're receiving from that relationship. What impact is it having on our lives? And do a little bit of writing about those relationships and kind of taking a closer inventory of what's happening. Is this relationship serving me? Do I feel seen and heard in this relationship? Right? And what is this relationship trying to teach me is such a powerful question, because some people come into our lives because there's a lesson that we're supposed to learn from them, right? And so asking yourself the question, what is this relationship trying to teach me, can be a very powerful practice. But take some time to do some writing about these relationships and taking a closer look at them. How are they serving you? Do you see that any of them are coming to an end? And if they are, what is the reason behind them coming to an end?
So powerful, so powerful. And, like I said earlier, having an honest conversation with yourself is such a big part of this journey. And doing it and writing it in a journal is even more powerful. I am sending everybody so much love and light. Feels like it's been an intense episode, and it does feel like it's an important message. So I'm sending everybody so much love and light. Be kind to yourself. If we can help in any way, please do reach out. If this episode has had an impact, then do reach out and get some help. If it resonates to reach out to us, please do that. If you want to reach out to any other organization that you feel, please do. Asking for help and support is such a powerful, powerful thing to do. I'm sending so much love and light out to everybody that's listening. Thank you, Stace, for this space. You gave a good example of kind of the journey of ending of a soul contract for us. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to you to close us out.
Yeah, I think the one thing I want to say before we close out is, Nims, I'm really glad that we have a soul contract. I'm really grateful
Yeah.
for the work that we do together and the way that we're able to impact one another and other people. And I'm deeply honored for the ripple effect that this soul contract has had, that we've been able to serve so many people on so many different levels because we connected through a social media app. So I
Yeah.
just want
It's
to say
crazy.
thank you. Yeah, I want to say thank you, because without that, I don't know how I would have gotten through the challenges that I've faced and been able to have an impact on others the way that we have. So I'm grateful for this soul contract. Thank you for being in my life. Friends, thank you for being here with us on this episode. Another powerful, powerful episode. Grateful to be here and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Wow. Thanks, Stace. Thank you for those kind words. I'm grateful too. And sending everyone lots of love and light. Bye for now.